All righty, folks. How are we all doing? Good to have you back here for one more little section here um, in our trig in general, in this first trig unit. So yesterday we learned a whole bunch of stuff, right? We learned how sine is related to y and cosine is related to x, and then how all these different angles relate to each other. Now, that's all well and good if our angle is on the unit circle. If it's not on the unit circle, it's not quite as straightforward. So for instance, if it's not on the unit circle, like we'll have over here off to the left, it's not on the unit circle, that means our radius isn't 1. So that means our sine is not our y value. It's related to the y value, but it's not the y value. Our cosine would not be our x value. It would be related to the x value, but not the x value. So they're related, but they're not exact, right? On the unit circle, the y is sine, the x is cosine. But if it's not on the unit circle, in other words, when the radius isn't 1, then it's a little bit different. Then we got to do a little bit more work. So sine of theta then would be y over r. Cosecant of theta would then be r over y. Cosine of theta would be x over r. And secant of theta would be r over x. And tangent of theta still is y over r, and cotangent still will be, I'm sorry, tangent will still be y over x, cotangent will still be x over y. That didn't change. But notice, we have to deal with the radius if it's not on the unit circle, which isn't that big a deal. It's just some things we need to remember. So all we're going to do today is we're going to play with a series of problems. And on each of these, we're going to ask it to narrow some stuff down. And as we narrow some stuff down, we'll be able to figure out where our angle is located. So let's start here. Sine of theta is greater than 0. So if sine theta is greater than 0, remember that sine is related to y. So what I'm really asking you is, when is y greater than 0? So when we're looking at a problem like this, as I'm starting to try to figure out when is my y value greater than 0, I'm going to cross off the regions where that's not true. So in other words, the regions where it wouldn't be true would be anything down here. So I'm going to stay away from down here, because down here my y values are negative. So next up, we take a look at it here. Cotangent is the same thing as x over y. So in other words, if I'm breaking this up, 9 and 7, my x would be my 9 value, and the y would be my 7 value. Now realize that it's negative, but since y is positive, that means the negative had to go with the 9. So what we're going to do is we're going to graph a line, or graph this angle in the correct quadrant. So x is negative, y is positive. That's going to put it in quadrant 2. So it'd be right about there. Now, I know what some of you guys are going to say. Wait a second, we're dealing with negative lengths. Yeah, but think of it more in terms of like location, right? It's just dealing with a location. So x is negative 9, y is 7. So now I have to deal with figuring out what the r value is. Yeah, so sine is not 7. Cosine is not negative 9, because this is not on the unit circle. So therefore, I have to figure out then what would be the r value. So negative 9 squared plus 7 squared equals r squared. So 81 plus 49 equals r squared. 130 equals r squared. And then when I take my square root, plus or minus 130 equals r. Now I put the plus or minus there for a reason, because sometimes it could be a positive, sometimes it could be a negative when I'm doing my Pythagorean theorem. So looking at where I'm at here, would this be a positive root 130 or a negative root 130? Well, the radius, unless we're dealing with something called a polar coordinate, our radius is always going to be our positive value. So we're going to take the positive root 130. Now, from there, it's just a matter of just plugging everything in and figuring it all out. So sine is not y. Sine would be y over r. So 7 over the square root of 130. Now, this is not on the unit circle, so I do not need to simplify it. Cosecant is the reciprocal. Cosine is negative 9 over root 130. And I could put the negative where I put it. I could put it up at the 9 if I wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Tangent, that is y over x, so 7 over negative 9. Cotangent, well, we were given that one, but it's also the reciprocal of tangent. And then we're dealing with our complementary function. So there's my co. So if there is no co, I add it. If there is a co, I take it away. So that means that complementary function that we're dealing with there is really actually just sine. So sine of theta, so I go back up and I look at what I put for sine of theta, and that would be 7 over square root of 130. Alrighty, friends, why don't you guys pause the video and see how you do on this next one. Okay, let's take a look here. So I'm going to draw my angle again, and I'm going from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. So they told me I'm somewhere in between here. So I'm going from this angle over here to this angle. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to cross off anything that I'm not going to use. So I'm not what I wanted there. So I'm not using anything over here in quadrant 1 and 4. So those are gone. So I'm looking at my sine. If sine is negative, so that means my y value is going to be a negative number. So that's down here. So sine is the same thing as y over r. So y over r. So since my r value has to be positive, that means that negative is going to go with the negative 3. So y is negative 3, r is going to be 5. So I'm going to put that on my graph. I got to deal with my x value now. So let's go figure out what that is. So x squared plus negative 3 squared equals r squared. So x squared plus 9 equals 25. X squared equals 16. X is a plus or minus 4. So then we go and we look here. Where's the graph at? Well, it's on the negative side of the x-axis. So that means my x value here is going to actually be the negative 4, not the positive 4. People get a little reckless when it comes to their signs, and that's one of the biggest things they miss. Be careful on that. So sine I already knew it was given to me. That's negative 3/5. So cosecant is the reciprocal of it, negative 5/3. Cosine is negative 4/5. Secant is the reciprocal. Tangent, that's negative divided by negative, so -3 divided by -4. Now I do need to reduce that because negative divided by negative makes that a positive, so my tangent should be positive there. And cotangent is the reciprocal of it. And again, down here I'm going to write my word. So I'm dealing with cosecant. If there is no co, I'm going to add it. But if there is a co, then I'm going to take it away. So I have a co here, I'm going to take it away. Not what I want blue this time. Take it away, and I'm left with secant. So the complementary function would be secant. So secant of theta, whatever I got for secant, that will be my answer. So -5/4. All right, I'm hoping we're kind of getting the gist of this a little bit here. Okay, let's kind of move forward a little bit more. All right, let's try this next one here. Go ahead and pause the video and see how you do with it. All right, so let's see what we got going on here. Cosine, that's going to be an x value. So I'm looking for an x value that's greater than 0. So x's that are greater than 0, that means I'm not over here. So those are gone. And then tangent is the same thing as y over x. So I have 7 is in the y spot, and 5 is in the x spot. But notice my x has to be greater than 0. So since x has to be greater than 0, the y value would be the negative. So -7/5. That would be down here. -7 and 5. And again, we got to go and figure out the r value this time. So 5 squared plus -7 squared equals r squared. So 25 plus 49 equals r squared. So 74 equals r squared. And we're going to take the square root of that. So plus or minus root 74. And since it's the radius I'm dealing with here, the radius is always going to be the positive value. So we'll take the positive root 74. And now it's just a matter of doing our ratios. So y over r, and then reciprocal. X over r, and the reciprocal of it. We were given this one, y over x, and we are going to take the reciprocal of it, -5/7. And then we have our complementary function here. So why is that blue? Cotangent, and we look at it. And since it has a CO, we cross it off and we realize that its cofunction would be tangent. So that means this is tangent of theta. Which would be -7/5. Remember, if there was no co in front of the trig function, we add the co. But since this had a co, we take it away. All right, these next two, go ahead and figure out where the angles are located, then pause it and see what you guys came up with. See how you did. All righty, friends. I'm going to just go ahead and draw both these up here. So if theta equals pi, we've already got a little practice at our unit circle now. So this is on the unit circle. So this one, the radius will be 1. If it doesn't specify it, whoa, that was not a point, although that was cool. So this will be the point -1, 0. So this one I can actually go ahead and use my ratios from the unit circle. So sine would be 0, cosecant would be 0/1, which is undefined. That was undefined because this was 0/1. Cosine was -1. The reciprocal of -1 is in -1. Tangent is y/x, so 0/-1, that would be 0. Cotangent then would have been -1/0, which we cannot have, so that would be undefined. And then we have ourselves a co-function again, cosine. So if we cancel out the co part there, we would have been left with sine. So this is dealing with sine. And sine was 0. Well, this next one is going to be a little bit dealing with some of our coterminal angles. So I'm not on the unit circle here on this one, so I'm going to have to subtract 2 pi until I get into from 0 to 2 pi. So 16 pi over 3 minus 2 pi. So that's the same thing as 16 pi over 3 minus 6 pi over 3. So when I subtract 2 pi to begin with, I end up with 10 pi over 3. I didn't quite get us to where we wanted to get to yet. So we're going to do it again. And we'll subtract 6 pi over 3 again here. And we ended up with 4 pi over 3. All right, so we're going to be at 4 pi over 3, but I'm going to go ahead and sketch it here. So there's my first one, my second one, and my third one right there. So that's the angle right there. So this is 16 pi over 3. All right, and that point on that unit circle would have been, so at 4 pi over 3, I would have had -1/2 and -√3/2. So now we can go ahead and write everything in here. Sine is -√3/2. Cosecant will be the reciprocal of that, so -2√3/3. Cosine is -1/2. The reciprocal would be -2. Tangent on this one will be y/x, so let's figure that out real quick. And that ends up being, the negatives cancel out, the 2's cancel out. I'm left with √3/1, which is the same thing as √3. Cotangent is going to be the reciprocal of it. So the reciprocal of √3 is 1/√3, which is the same thing as √3/3. And then for my trig value, or my complementary one. I got another one of those again. That's cotangent. So we will go ahead and get rid of the co, since it's there, and it means I'm dealing with tangent. So cotangent is really going to be tangent of theta. And that is equal to root 3. All righty. So we're just about done here. Got a couple more things to look at here. And then we will be good. All right, so our final two problems deals with what happens if we have a terminal point. In other words, we have some graph where I'm giving you the x and y. So 11, negative 2. So we got to figure out where 11, negative 2 is. So that would be about here. So the terminal ray, or the terminal side of an angle, that means it's going to end right here at 11, negative 2. So this is the point right here. So if we wanted to turn that into a triangle, we'd have negative 2 and 11. What we don't have is the radius, so we'd have to find that radius. So let's go find that radius real quick. So r squared equals negative 2 squared plus 11 squared. And friends, you can kind of already see by now, this one is not going to be on the unit circle. So r squared is going to be 4 plus 121. R squared is 125. And we're going to take the square root of that. So since it's the r value, it will be the positive part of the square root. So from there, we're going through and we are finding all 6 trig values. So sine of theta, cosine of theta, tangent of theta, and then cosecant, secant, and cotangent. All righty, friends. So sine again is y over r, so negative 2 over the square root of 125. So cosecant will be the reciprocal of it, square root of 125 divided by negative 2. Cosine is 11 over the square root of 125. Secant would be the reciprocal. Tangent is negative 2 over 11. Cotangent would be the reciprocal. All right, friends, final problem from this chapter. Why don't you guys go and pause the video and take a shot at it yourself, and then we will talk about it. All right, let's see how you did here. First up, they're both negative, so that means it's going to be somewhere down here. And I didn't make it steep enough. That's all right, though. It doesn't need to be drawn to scale. So we end up at the point negative 2 root 3 and negative 8. That was not a 3. So we're going to put those right here on our triangle. And in order for us to do this, we're going to need to figure out what would be the r value. So r squared equals -2 root 3 squared plus -8 squared. So now this first one, I got to square both the -2 and the root 3. So -2 is 4. Root 3 would be just 3 plus 64. So r squared is 12 plus 64. R squared is 76. So r is equal to the plus or minus square root of 76. Alrighty, so if you need to pause the video again to kind of fix your sign in all your trig values, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we will go through and evaluate the triangle. All right, let's see how you guys all did here. And then tangent and cotangent. All right, sine y over r, so -8 over square root of 76. So that would be, the reciprocal would be root 76 over -8. Cosine is going to be -2 root 3 over the square root of 76. And secant will be the reciprocal of that. Tangent is going to be y over x. Now I can divide the -8 by the -2, so I'm going to do that because first of all, it makes it positive because it's not negative. And I end up getting 4 over root 3. So cotangent would be root 3 over 4. All righty, friends, we've reached the end. Take a little break and we will talk about it a little bit more in class. So take care.